how often have you seen a headline that says the robots might be taking over? How often have you seen a headline saying that the robots are taking our jobs? How often have you seen a headline saying robots are doing this or doing that? You know what? We don't even know what a robot is. So I think when we use that word, we confuse ourselves. We create a kind of mythical idea of these magical beings out there. I think we confuse ourselves. And I'm brought to this topic by a piece that I really enjoyed in Slate magazine by Will Oremus called Why Robot? Get it? I robot, why robot? Okay, so, and what he was saying, what he did a good thing. He pointed out that the AP has been publishing corporate earnings reports. We've covered it on the show here, written entirely by computer programs, so that an earnings statement gets issued, the computer program reads the information in, and then based on a template, it generates a news story. Okay. Fine. But now here's what Will Oremus points out, and I think he makes a great point. Here's one headline. AP's robot journalists are writing their own stories now. That's what was in The Verge. Robot writing, here's another headline. Robot writing increased AP's earnings stories by tenfold. And then someone else writes, he has a tweet from David Carr, who's a good writer on this stuff. I followed a link and read an earnings stories about the New York Times written by a robot. Now, Will Oremus's point is that what do we mean when we say something was written by a robot? It was written by a software program, which is fine, okay. But when you call it a robot, what happens in our minds? Right away, we start thinking about something with eyes, something with a mouth, something with hands and feet, something that walks around, something that is very much like a human being and could, in fact, usurp us as a human being. In the ultimate fantasy, we might think of a science fiction scenario where it looks and sounds exactly like us and inserts itself into our family lives, and they never know the difference. The fact is that we're mythologizing technology far too much. These are not robots, okay? What these are is software programs. When you call it a robot, you're giving it a kind of agency. You're giving it a kind of identity. That's where a lot of our artificial intelligence conversation goes wrong too, because the fact is we haven't developed artificial intelligence yet, unless you think a thermostat is intelligent. And here's what I mean by that. Think about a simple thermostat. If you know how it works, some thermostats simply have a little bit of mercury in them, and when the mercury or the other metal in it swells to a certain point, it pushes a switch, and that turns off the heating system. Now, in a sense, that's an intelligent system. It, quote unquote, knows when it's getting hotter in the room. So it, quote unquote, knows when to turn on the heat. Then as the metal cools, it gets smaller and the switch is flipped again and the heat comes back on. Now, would you call that a robot? Because if so, then robots have been around for at least 100 years. Would you call that a robot or would you call it a switch? A lot of computer programs, most in fact, are sophisticated sets of switches. They are not intelligent. They are not going to replace you and me. They are not learning how to love. They are not learning how to hate. They are not threatening our existence. Now, we will, on this program, explore what might happen if robots or software or technology in general did acquire personalities and characteristics and emotions. We're going to do that in this episode. But let's be clear. We don't live in a world surrounded by robots. We don't read news articles created by robots. Robots are not going to change 50% of our jobs, as headlines said recently. The study said that, which those headlines referenced, said that half of our jobs would be taken by technology. There's a big difference. We are not engaged in a war of the species against Skynet. We are trying to figure out as a society how to use technology wisely, fairly, humanely, and sanely. That is not an epic battle. It is what societies do and will continue to do, and we will continue to report it. I'm Richard, RJ Eskow, and this is The Zero Hour.